Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's coming. Okay.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Barnhouse and I were
So
just
it's
talking
like,
about.
you know she's back here, so.
We were just talking about doing a concert piece anyway. So
Yeah.
I was going to sing and he was going to back up. Or he was going to sing and I was going to back up.
Okay,
So, yeah.
and you're a great singer,
Okay.
Dr. June.
Well, good
so-
afternoon and thank you. This has been a fantastic conference. I was just saying to Janet this morning, I don't know how we've missed this gold mine called Pensacola, Florida, to do Destination High Performance. It's just been phenomenal. But anyway, we're going to talk about the future of community and technical college, and I'm going to be very honest. I'm pondering every day about the future and the fate of higher education and the future of community and technical college. I think what we would agree is that it's still work in progress, and the fact of the matter is it's leadership in progress as well. So I'm going to talk about South Louisiana Community College. South Louisiana Community College. And where we are, thank you, and where we are and what we are considering as we think about the future of a comprehensive community college that serves 9 campuses in 8 parishes, particularly on the heels of COVID, but also too, just getting used to all the new normalcy around operating, coexisting, developing new programs, and just all of the different things that come with the territory of being in higher education at this point. There are 3 things that we are considering when we think about the future of building a comprehensive community college. One is assessing and accepting and aligning where we are in higher education. I think based on the presentations that we've heard today, I think for the most part, all of us have been talking about varying dimensions of that, varying complexities of it, and the fact of the matter is we still have to chart through it. The second area is looking at the integrated value of product lines on student success. For us at SOCC, we look at our 3 product lines as adult basic education, credit, and we look at non-credit. For us, it's all the same in terms of how we're packaging it, and what does that mean, and what is the value of that as we continue to serve our community. The third area is re-engaging internal and external stakeholders. I think more than now, we're having to reevaluate what does that look like? What does that mean? When we think about the dimensions that have and the changes that have occurred internally of the institution, the question that we've asked ourselves is what has changed externally? There have been so many leadership changes at the K through 12 level. There have been new CEOs with various business and industry partners, hospital CEOs, just the whole gamut. And so at the end of the day, we can't make an assumption that they understand who we are. So we're finding ourselves having to navigate that and to re-educate and to continuously educate our partners on who we are and what we're doing. When we think about our vision and what lens we're looking through, here is a clear depiction of what we're looking at as we continue to build the future for South Louisiana Community College. It looks at our stakeholders' input, obviously our alignment with our system office, our Louisiana Community and Technical College system. We have a focus on strategic initiatives that help support our employees as well as create a best place to work for our employees. But also, too, we're also looking at our college blueprint. We often refer to this as our academic blueprint, right? And so we're having to look at what that is and how does that mesh well with our community needs and how is it market-driven in that context. When I came to South Louisiana Community College in 2016, Dr. Harder hired me from the University System of Georgia, and one of the questions that I asked all of the campus directors who reported to me at that time was, what's happening in your backyard? Tell me about your programs. Why do we do these programs, right? And so I refer to them as legacy programs because really at the end of the day, if you're not careful, the word that I heard from Dr. Kelly this morning was about perpetuating relevancy for the college. In order for the college to stay relevant, or any university or college to stay relevant, the programs have to mirror the needs of the communities that you serve. We had the luxury of doing something a little bit differently with our strategic plan. The question that was asked about the future of community college, particularly the lens that we're looking through, is what is the impact on the strategic plan? Well, fortunate for me, I happen to have been the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, And during the time of the transition, when Dr. Harder, who's now at Coker, transitioned, it came at the right time because we're on the tail end of our strategic plan. And so I decided to do something totally different that the college had not done. And we utilized Janet Pilcher, who worked with Dr. Miller, who's our Associate Vice Chancellor for Institutional Effectiveness, to do something a little bit differently. This time we extended an invitation to roughly about 140 stakeholders to participate in our strategic planning process. Why? Because we didn't want to make an assumption that everyone who had some alignment with the college understood what this particular jewel in our community is supposed to be doing. So we wanted to be sure that we had more of an intentional grassroots types of approach in order to do that. So we did something differently. Our strategic plan also called for us to create more innovative types of opportunities for our students. We could no longer, and we're no longer doing business as usual, right? We're having to think outside the box. Dr. Harder spoke about her reference to different articles in the Chronicles and, higher ed, just a gamut of different things that are happening across the country in order to keep the institution relevant in real time. We're having to do the same thing. It calls for support on student success. What does that look like? We're having to ask ourselves, our faculty, and our staff, what does success look like now? Success has to look a little bit differently than it looked pre-COVID, and certainly it has to look a little bit differently post-COVID. We're also continuing to look through the lens of creating a best place to work environment for our employees, right? Why? Because if we're going to coexist, cohabitate, we have to be able to incentivize and create an environment where we're not only investing in the institution to be a resource for students, but also we have to invest in our employees so that we can help chart out opportunities for them to grow both personally and professionally as well. Addressing community needs and job demands. I mean, obviously that is kind of the song of all songs right now, right? And so when we've spent the past year and 3 months talking to our business and industry partners, one of the things we kept hearing was a disconnect with some of our programs, our academic programs, and even our non-credit programs, right? And so for us, in real time, along with mandates from the Board of Regents, and also the strategic lens that the Louisiana community college system is looking through, we have to look at things a little bit different and make sure that we're meeting the community needs and that our academic program aligns with job demands as well. And then lastly, obviously, is institutional sustainability, right? What does that mean for your institution in terms of not only doing these creative and innovative things, right, but how do you sustain that? What does that look like, right? Anticipated growth, particularly in this peculiar time, right? So I broke this up into 9 different categories, right? One focuses on increased business and industry partners and external stakeholders, as well as campus advisory boards, right? For us as a multi-campus operations, we are having to look through things a little bit differently, right? Some of you have the luxury of being one campus, serving one community. Unfortunately for South Louisiana Community College, we have 9 campuses and 8 parishes. So I'm all over the place. I like to look at Vincent Jones as a 5-pronged to laundry services, right? Vincent June has to sort the laundry, he has to wash the laundry, he has to dry the laundry, he has to fold the laundry, and then Vincent has to put the laundry away, right? So when you think about how things in higher education are operating, particularly when you're a multi-campus operation, it requires us to look at things differently. So our campus advisory boards is one of the new ways that we are looking through our lens to better serve the institution, but also the community. In the past, these campus advisory boards were the eyes and ears of the campuses. And these are folks who, over the last year and a half, as I've done what I refer to as VIP tours, they said, you know what, we used to be the eyes and ears of the campus. We really want to volunteer our service, and we really want to help connect the institution to the community, and we want to volunteer where there are gaps at. So we're capitalizing off of that moving forward. Increased focus on program expansion and right sizing. That is our college blueprint. Dr. Crystal Lee, who is now the new me in the role of Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, she and the academic deans have done a phenomenal job dating back to 5 years of historical data and really carving through and really navigating through right-sizing our program. So much so that we're looking at consolidating, adding new programs, and even in some cases, eliminating programs that are not of value, particularly in serving our market. Increased focus on strategic engagement initiatives. We have transformed what used to be professional development into a formalized office where we are investing and putting our money where our mouth is in terms of making sure we carve out experiences for our faculty and our staff. Again, that helps us to develop them both personally and professionally, while at the same time creating a best work environment for our college. Integrating current and projected community needs in educational roadmaps. That is the epitome of survival moving forward for us. We're having to weave in different constructs that mirror and align with our partnerships and our market needs. Increasing workforce reskilling and upskilling. That is the beauty of being a comprehensive community college, as well as taking on kind of the technical aspects of workforce as well. What does that mean as it relates to real-time, in-demand types of opportunities, particularly when we've been impacted with COVID, as well as just the shortages in employment opportunities in our state, but also across the country in general. The increase in academic alignment, that's been critical for us. We're carving out new niches and new redesigns in our early college academy, our dual enrollment space, as well as implementing and expanding our career and technical academy types of frameworks. Our career and technical academy types of frameworks kind of mirror early college, but essentially what happens is that our students they walk away with a high school diploma and they walk away with a technical diploma either in welding or medical assistant or some other technical program simultaneously while graduating with a high school diploma, okay? Increasing and securing external funding, right? We're having to look through that lens a little bit differently. I'm having, even as a chancellor, to put on additional duties as assigned types of hats, right? To write federal programs that I know I don't have depth on the bench to do it. And so I've had to have Dr. Miller carve out data for me. I've had to give up 2 weekends, write narratives, and I had to tap another person to come up with a program design, just so that we can build capacity and the resources that's necessary. Hire additional folks to fill those roles when we receive those types of funding opportunities, but also to have conversations with our business and industry partners about our vision. They have been very adamant about being part of the new vision for South Louisiana Community College, and they're asking and saying, how can we support a new bridge program? What does that look like in terms of funding? And so we're wearing them out, let me just say it that way. Adopting alternative business models. We have to look at what does that mean in terms of cost savings to the student, but also efficiencies for the institution, right? And so we're taking on some different twists and turns in terms of consolidating some areas, but also looking at different business models that allow us to be able to generate the revenue that we need to, but also from a collaborative standpoint too, that also allows us to shift some of the cost efficiencies, or increased cost efficiencies. Critical decisions to create a bright future for SOCC. Well, I can tell you in a nutshell that there are a couple of things that we're looking at, right? So when I think about the work that we've done in the space prior to COVID, even when Dr. Harder was the chancellor, essentially we were trying to get the mechanics of the institution right? Trying to get everybody to move in alignment with one another, right? And so here we're looking at our comprehensive strategic plan. Remember now, we had over 140 external stakeholders to be part of this conversation. So we have to be able to deliver what we say we're going to do, but the reality of the matter is too, we have to allow our external stakeholders to see the benefits, right? So they don't just sit to the table to help us to create the strategic plan. It's imperative that we create different scenarios so that they can follow us along the way, so they can see the return on the investment in that space. Executing and monitoring a comprehensive academic plan. That's our college blueprint. We are relying on this for the next 5 years to be able to make inroads and to be able to do things a little bit differently that we have not done in the past, and being able to follow it in such a way that we're able to run interference when necessary to be able to make the changes that will allow us to execute the most benefit to the student and benefit to the community. Strategic alignment with our system office. Many of you have Board of Regents office and other types of structures, right? So in our system, we're having to navigate two. We're having to navigate Board of Regents, we're having to navigate the Louisiana Community and Technical College system, and then obviously, internally, we have our vision. I think we are the experts in terms of really knowing what's going on in our backyard. A lot of people see that as something simple, but it's not, particularly when you're trying to make sure that you get from a means to an end, right? And lastly, building and sustaining leadership development, right? In this case, I call it depth and capacity. What I didn't hear today was the conversation about talent, right, and leadership, right? I look at talent and leadership to be totally different, right? I can have the smartest person in a role who can chart out things and get it done, but if I got that same person that needs to lead 5 other people to carve out some things and get to an end, and they can't get there, we got a problem, right? So I have a leadership issue. So I got great talent, but I have a problem with leadership. And so what we're experiencing is trying to make sure that we build both depth and we build both capacity in order to find that balance, right? Otherwise, I have to find Vincent June on number 3, 4, 5, or 6, or I have to duplicate multiple Crystal Lees or multiple Natalie Harders, multiple Anthony Baham in order to get things done, when in fact, I really don't have the right person in the right role. Expanding strategic employee engagement initiative is something that we really believe in, particularly when we're looking at new conversations around our DEI and just trying to keep everybody on the same page. I don't know from one morning to the next who's going to wake up on the right side of the bed, the left side of the bed, who may not even get out of bed at all, right? I mean, people are caught up in their feelings, and a huge chunk of my role, even when I was the vice chancellor, is just managing personalities and behavior. I used to tell Dr. Harder all the time, I am exhausted just from managing the personalities and behaviors, because I don't know who's going to show up one day and say, you know what, Dr. June, I think today is the day that I need a raise, right? Right? And I'm saying, well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's not how higher education works, right? You don't just wake up one morning and decide that you just want a raise, right? You have 2 ways to get there, either through succession, right? Or you decide to move up and move out, right? And so at any rate, having to manage that has been very time consuming. Allocating resources is appropriate. Being able to take risk on pilots. So I did hear about it's okay to fail, right? And so the lens that we're looking through is being able to pilot things. I tell my team all the time, it's okay to pilot. Let's just low key, low scale, let's pilot, let's see what the outcomes are gonna be. And if it works out, right? Then let's cascade it, let's scale it up. It's okay. So being able to take some risk with respect to program pilots. And then using data to qualify and quantify, right? At one point, we weren't an institution that embraced, if you will, data. I will give Dr. Harder tremendous credit in working with Dr. Miller. It's something that we move towards, and you have many people that have masters and PhDs, but data is just not their thing, right? So you have to make it fun, and we've been able to do that in a way where people understand the connectivity between quantification and qualification, and that is something that helps to tell our story and to create our narrative. Challenges to building a sustainable future for community and technical college, at least through the lens that we're looking through, the increase in accountability. I have read more articles, I've had more conversations recently with a couple of presidents at the recent AACC conference in New York, and just talking about some of the current challenges that vice presidents and CEOs are experiencing, and just the increase in accountability as it relates to communicating mandates throughout the institution, executing and scaling initiatives, delivering more degrees and credentials. I mean, every meeting that you're in, every article that you read speaks to that. Increasing the focus on retention and completion rate. I mean, we're just exhausted. We know that's what we have to do, right? Resource constraints, asking the community college to do more with less resources. I'm dealing with 2 issues now where I got someone who thinks they're the expert in the area, and they are, and they just, want to handcuff me and say, well, if I don't get my money, I'm going to leave. And I'm saying, okay, well, you do know I know how to do your job, right? I just have to do that job and be the chancellor at the same time, right? But these are challenges that we're having to deal with. I'm just saying, right? And so raising revenue for new resources, it wasn't in my wheelhouse, but I must say, after working with a wonderful consultant and a wonderful vice chancellor for institutional advancement that Dr. Harder groomed, we're kicking butt, taking name, identifying what those new resources are. I got people knocking at the door saying, how can we help you in that particular space? Competition, competing with organizations outside of higher education who are doing things a little bit differently, the Amazons, all these other folks who, work from home policies, it's a lot, right? Competing with private sector salary inflations, everybody wants to compare us to the Amazons, the Walmarts, and all this other good stuff, right? And then lastly, just leading, owning, monitoring, and specifically closing the loop, right? I'm telling my team all the time, We cannot leave the loop open. We have to close the loop. At any rate, so the last question was about how does SOC students and communities, I was having a conversation with Dr. Miller, and he summed it up for okay, there you go. He summed it up for me. He said, we support students and communities with everyday excellence by flipping our perspective of why we're here, understanding and focusing on what's needed, what's best for the community and our students, and then operationalize the delivery of that. It's a very different mindset from where we started in 2015, which was very much an internal focus on getting the college right operationally. So now that we've gotten the college right operationally, our goals is specifically to develop the strategies and tactics. And that's where we are basically hitting the mark, right? And a couple of quick examples. Where our focus is with 100 guided pathways, external relief planning, advisory board creation, as mobile app, technical education mobile app usage as part of our strategy to reach our adult population, Justice Pell, our EOC, and we're even looking at studying manufacturing so that we could look at employment gaps as well as alignment in that space as well. So that's how we see Louisiana community, the future of community and technical colleges, and I hope that this information has been very valuable to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to see everybody, and first things first, I want to thank everybody for coming back from break. I really mean that, because even though I'm speaking here this afternoon, I took a look at the water, and for a few minutes, I sort of forgot that I had something to do today. So honestly, thank you for coming back. And to Studer, if you're ever concerned about people sort of drifting off because you're in such a nice place, I would like to offer you the ability to come to Wisconsin in January. I guarantee you'll have a full house all the time. You think I'm joking? People be right there in the room with you. So Rich Barnhouse, WCTC. I've been president at WCTC for a little over a year now. And like some of my colleagues, I started as president there when nobody was on campus. And so my first day on campus, it was a pretty lonely place, but it's nice to see people all back together. A couple of things before I get rolling here. One is that I'm not right. This is just my opinion. So you can write that down. Rich Barnhouse is not right, but he's going to talk anyway. And I think that if you forget everything that I say today, which is not a bad idea, if you remember one thing, the bottom line is this, and that is that somebody in higher education has to stand up, plant their feet, and say, I'm not going to be average anymore, right? I'm not going to be average. We're not going to be an average institution. And so basically, I think that's what I'm trying to say here today. So as I was looking at this and thinking about community and technical colleges and strategic planning, I think oftentimes we start behind because we're not looking to the future. What do I mean by that? Well, so often we're not thinking far enough ahead. And I think that as an academy and as an industry, over the past maybe 15 years, we got used to this idea, or we got comfortable in this idea that it was so chaotic and too chaotic, and then therefore we couldn't plan into the future. So we could really only do 2, 3, maybe 4-year plans, because beyond that we couldn't see things because it was happening too quickly. And I think we got caught up in that. And so what happened to us, in my opinion, sort of like chaos theory, is that because we didn't push the future out a little bit further, the future came right to us and is constantly banging us in the face. And so we're typically surprised by what we see in higher ed because for a long time we haven't been pushing that future out. So at WCTC, what I'm asking our institution to do is think about what is the need for a college in a decade. We've got a lot, as you all know and have heard from our other colleagues here today, we've got a lot that's going to happen in this decade. But what is going to happen over the next 10 years, and what is basically the need for a college going to be in 10? Not 5, not 4, not 6, but in 10 years and beyond, what is the need for a college going to be? You've also heard our colleagues talk about this today as well, and that is, are you choosing the right challenges today? Because we all know that we could go back to our college or university, and there are tens of thousands of things that we could select to take on. Do they matter? And I don't think we ask ourselves that question enough. So will your selected challenges, because they are selected, are they going to matter in a decade? And if they don't matter in a decade, maybe it's time to start thinking, maybe we should step away from that, right? Somebody was talking about earlier today about the things we're not going to do. So if we're taking on challenges that really aren't going to have an impact, maybe we should ask ourselves, should we take that on? And then finally, as we're sort of searching for this horizon, and this is probably a day-long seminar conversation in itself, how do we ensure our survival? Right? We've talked about this. One of our colleagues said that there are 4,500 colleges in the United States, colleges and universities, right? 4,500. Not for long, right? Let's be honest about that. So what we're thinking about is, how many colleges and universities does our region need? So WCTC, and it's pronounced Waukesha, not Waukesha, which is how people love to pronounce it, Waukesha County Technical College. Waukesha is one of the larger suburbs of Milwaukee. So we're basically in the Milwaukee statistical area. Go Bucks. And so we've got 18 colleges and universities, public, private, 2-year, 4-year, 18 in southeast Wisconsin, in the greater Milwaukee area. How many do we need? How many can our region support? And that's an important distinction, because back in the good old days, even if you only needed 4 colleges, the area might be able to support 7. But that's completely flipped. And then how do you ensure that your college is one of them, one of those that's going to survive? And so these are some of the questions that we're starting to think about and trying to answer. Some of the points of pressure that we find ourselves facing in the 2-year setting, but I'm sure our 4-year colleagues and friends would say they're facing some of the same things. Starting with this, and we always talk about, we're not the institution on the hill anymore, and we're reaching out and communicating and talking with people. I don't think we're really doing a good job of that. And in the 2-year setting, right, community technical colleges, we are embedded in the community. But the most important term up there is palpable. Because unless the community actually feels your involvement, right, I think we've got to not just be out and in the community and standing on shop floors and talking with people in their offices. We have to be leading in community organizations. We have to be on executive boards in community organizations. We have to be essential to the community, not just because we educate all of the students and then deliver a workforce, because we're essential beyond simply being educators. And I think this is a tough question to answer, right? Where does responsibility lie? We know we're responsible, but to whom are we actually responsible? Number one is student. That's really easy to say, student, student, student. But because, and I'm not saying we should shift our focus, but because we've just said, okay, student, we know the answer, now we can move on, we've forgotten all those other people we're responsible to, right? So, as I look about it as a public institution, I'm responsible to the taxpayers. I got to deliver. I actually held a taxpayer town hall. Other presidents out there, if you decide to do that, let's have a conversation first, okay? I'll give you a couple heads up on a couple things I'd avoid. But I'm responsible to the taxpayers and to the employers and to the civic organizations and to the K-12. And it doesn't mean just acknowledging it. It means you can never treat them like a student, but I think we got to start thinking about the people we're responsible to in a similar way, in driving that responsibility a little bit differently. My table is tired of hearing me talk about this point. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. Everybody in this room is probably familiar with the demographic slide that's happening. Statistically, nationally, it's 2025 to 2032 and beyond. But I put 2022 here because we did the data. And in our region of the state of Wisconsin, we are going to lose 12.4% of our graduating high school class between those dates. And so we're already starting to think about how do we prepare for that, right? There are 18 colleges and universities. As some of our colleagues have already talked about, you can make $60,000 a year without even a high school diploma, get full benefits, and get a $2,000 signing bonus. So we've got some headwinds. I think we need to start thinking about this, and that's something that we're really having a serious conversation about at WCTC. Making meaning out of DEI. So I'm new in the president role. This is my first presidency. I see a couple people smiling. And when I talk to, because I did call people to say, how do you do this job, right? Once I got into it, I thought I should maybe figure out how a president was supposed to perform. So I made some calls around the country, talked to some chancellors and presidents that I know, and we got onto the topic of DEI. And every single person, every single president and chancellor I talked to, many are in their third and fourth presidencies, all said, don't know what to do about this. We know we need to do something, but don't know what to do about it. As I'm thinking about DEI at WCTC, I think we've got to find a way to make meaning out of diversity, equity, and inclusion for individuals. We can tell a college this is going to be our approach, but that doesn't matter to an individual who's sitting on the fence, or an individual who says, yeah, okay, I'll do the training, but I'm not really interested in, yeah, okay, just can I do the training and move on? We have to find a way to make meaning out of DEI for people individually. And I think if we can get them individually to find meaning in the work, we'll make real progress as colleges and universities. But that's definitely a point of pressure. And then this is something that will probably make me the most unpopular person in the room today, and I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that. But moving away from higher education groupthink is a huge point of pressure. So full disclosure to you all, about 7 years ago, I dropped all my memberships. I got out of everything. This is the first conference I've been to in 7 years because I knew as a professional, I needed to take a step back and stop following the crowd because I wasn't improving as a higher ed professional. Now, that was my approach. I'm not suggesting it should be the approach for everybody. But I think we've got to really start questioning best practices. To who? To whom, right? There are only a few places where a sociologist and a physicist will agree, right? And this is one, that you can't take one model and drop it in someplace and expect it to work. In fact, you can't even take 3 or 4 elements of that model, drop it in someplace and expect it to work. So I'm trying to project this thought at WCTC, and that is that all theories and all models are wrong, but some are useful. So let's take a couple of those useful pieces and drop them in. Environmental scans. I think for some of us, and I'll just say myself in this, that got so focused on looking externally that forgot what was internal to the institution. So it's sort of the idea of thinking outside of the box gone insane. That you're thinking so far out of the box, you're only thinking outside of the box that you've forgotten what your institution is. And I think from time to time, certainly a 2-year setting, we've been pulled off track by that. And so I mentioned about conferences and organizational memberships, and when I say over-reliant on consultants, right, I don't mean don't use consultants. I wouldn't be in this room, right? We're a Studer campus. But I think that sometimes you've got to think for yourselves. We've got to think for ourselves. And if for every problem we're turning to somebody else, that all of these things together collectively, what they do is they push us all with the same problems to the same place with the same solutions coming out. So if there are 4,500 colleges and universities in this country, we should have more than 6 approaches to enrollment management. We should have more than 10 ways to do academic planning. But we don't. Should we have 500? I don't know. That sounds like a lot. But we should probably have a few more. So I think as much as we get together and talk together and steal ideas from each other, and we do, we also have to be sure that we're creating things for us, by us, for our institutions. And just because somebody else is doing something and it works there, doesn't mean that it's going to be effective on our campus. Okay, unplanning for college planning. So the most important thing, and this is really about strategic planning here, the most important thing in higher education, and I would argue in any organization in the world, is really having an engaged workforce, right? If you've got an engaged workforce that is emotionally attached to the mission and vision, they're no longer paycheck players. They'll come in on Saturdays and weekends if they're emotionally attached to your institution. But what does a strategic plan never do? Ever. It never really increases engagement by employees. Now, it might increase engagement at the executive level and maybe the dean level, but if you ask the majority of people on a college campus, what do you think your strategic plan? They usually get the dry heaves and then run out the door because nobody even knows what it means, and those that do understand what it means, it has no meaning for them. So I think it's time for a new approach to planning, and I think that a lot of our colleagues here today have basically touched on this quite a bit. But I really think that a strategic plan, if it doesn't move, motivate, influence, and inspire an institution, then how is it strategic? If it's just checking boxes, how does that move an institution other than being able to say to a board, and we all have them, we accomplish these goals? If that doesn't make your institution better over the long run, not just for the 4 or 5 years that it's there, but beyond that, then I really question how is that strategic. And so that's something that we're taking a very serious look at at WCTC. And this is what it drives: organic evolution. So what is organic evolution? It's getting better and better inch by inch every single day without even realizing that you're doing it. And this is something that I implemented when I was vice president at the State College of Florida, just down the road. Well, I guess about 7 hours down the road in Sarasota. And it was amazing. Once people caught on, it was organic evolution because they didn't even realize that they were trying to get better every day. And it was many of those employees that we all have that it's either they're going to get on or we're going to say goodbye to them. And watching those people flip was really, really good. And I say organic evolution or revolution, your choice, because in higher ed, we've all come along over the last, I guess, 20, 25 years, but some of you that have been doing this a lot longer than me, you might say the last 50. And we come to these points where it's all of a sudden massive change. And then we go for a little while longer, 5, 6, 8, sometimes 10 years, and then it's another massive change. That in higher education is a constant revolution. And it's a constant revolution and causes major disruption because, in my opinion, again, it's my opinion, I'm not right, instead of organically evolving and ingraining that in our culture, we move along crisis change. We move along crisis change. And I think the answer to that is organic evolution. So at WCTC, you'll notice that I've got framework bolded here, because we are not building a plan yet. We don't have a framework, so how can we build a plan? But we're building a new framework, and we're not going to call it strategic planning. We're not going to use that, and it might seem ridiculous, but we're not going to use that term strategic planning anymore, because as soon as I say it, I lose the entire college. Nobody wants to talk about it. Now, I can share that with my board of trustees. They understand what that means. My board is made up of business people. They get that. But if I start by saying we're going to build a new strategic plan, I lose at least half the room I'm talking to, and probably a little bit more. Now, that's semantical and not all that important, but I think it has some importance to it. So we're building a new framework. We're working with Gail from Studer to think through how do we build something that actually inspires people, where they actually find meaning out of this. And so as I talk to my team that I'm working with this on, the number one thing I want out of this strategic plan, there I go. I just said I wasn't going to say it, right? All right, don't tell anybody back in Wisconsin. The number one thing for this plan is when people cross over Main Street onto our campus, I want them to feel like no matter how their day started out, right? Whether they spilled coffee on their shirt, a kid threw up on their shoes, they got in a fight with their spouse or partner, that when they cross over Main Street onto our campus, that they want to be there and they feel attached to it and they understand where we're going. And that has to be part of what this type of plan does. So we're building a framework. We're in the early stages of this. We're going to take our time building the framework because we're not aware of another one that exists. Okay, so some of the critical decisions. Things are really changing for two-year colleges, right? Technical community colleges, because society is asking more of us. And as the bones of higher education break, we're going to continue to see changes in our four-year partners as well as in the two-year partners. So, and we're adjusting to this. We're adjusting to what society is asking of us, and we're adjusting to, let's be honest here, you've heard this in various ways from our colleagues today, the bones cracking a little bit. It's not a disaster, but if we don't take care of business, it could be. DEI, period. If we don't get this right in the next several years, if we don't make significant progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not just failing ourselves or our students, we're failing society. Because society looks at us to figure things out, and we have got to get this right. And so I say DEI, period. And then an evolution. And I wasn't joking, I didn't just forget to leave insert name here. That's not a typo. But insert name here. What are community and technical colleges? What do we call them? And we have one of our staff is working on her dissertation, and she's studying our institution as a case study, and she said, well, what do we call ourselves? We're a technical college, but that's like a small part of what we do, right? Because we got liberal arts and all these other things as well. So what do we call ourselves? So I went and asked my VP for academics, and he said, well, I don't know, maybe we should just call ourselves a comprehensive two-year institution, which is not really a sexy name, right? So we got to start thinking about this a little bit differently. But I think you'll see from two-year community technical colleges an evolution in who we are as those bookends continue to be moved out. And then the ideal enrollment approach, that's made up by me. Again, I'm not right, it's just my opinion. I came up through traditional enrollment management. That was my background. That's how I landed here, through enrollment and student affairs. Strategic enrollment management, I think, has worked okay for the last 25 or 30 years, but it doesn't deliver what we need to deliver. And so an ideal enrollment and management approach, this is another day-long seminar, but it looks at it differently. And it really gets down to where are we at our best? Not just overall, but by discipline, right? How many students should be in English, in an English section? How many students should be in Calculus 2? And all the disciplines in between. Where are we at our best so that we don't get to diminishing returns, which is we build up and we grow, and then we stop serving students well. From I can't get a sandwich, I can't get in to see an advisor, there are 36 people in a class where it would really be best if there were 18, and all of the other points of contact that students have on campus. So the ideal enrollment management approach is really where are we at our best? Not forgetting that budget is also part of that. So headcount, FTE, credit load, and all of those things that I mentioned coming together, where are we at our very best? So thank you for spending a little bit of time of your day with me. And again, thank you for returning from break. Really appreciate that. And again, I just want to, I'll end with where I started, and that is that somebody has to stand up, and I'm not suggesting that this is me, right? But somebody has to stand up and say, we're just not going to be average anymore. We're going to call it out like it is. We're going to be honest with our colleagues and move on from there. So thank you very, very much. We'll look forward to having a drink or a cocktail with you all up by the pool and enjoying the weather. So thanks to Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.